Joseph Suaalii. He snubs the Kangaroos and decides to stick with Samoa. I think this caught a lot of people off guard, possibly even Mal. How do we see this one, Kenty?
I think it's quite disappointing for Australia. I think it's a real oversight that they've allowed it to happen. I think Mal Meninga should have got on the phone and should have made sure that he was locked in. Unfortunately, it hasn't happened. And he's gone to Samoa, so off he goes.
Kenny, it's great for the international game.
Why?
Look, I'll tell you why. Because I grew up as a kid and there was Australia, England, France and New Zealand. And there was only 4 teams. And then the French fell away. The Poms have been very ordinary. And we needed, for an international game, new nations to emerge. And Tonga, Samoa have added...
They have emerged.
Sorry?
They have emerged.
Well, they've only emerged because there's some players there who are putting money aside, business class seats aside, single hotel rooms aside to play for their heritage. And I love it. I do.
I don't think there's anything Mel could have done. I think Joe sat down with his family after the season was over at the Roosters, had a discussion with them. He's got grandparents in Samoa. He's got close ties to the Samoan community. And I don't think Mel could have swayed him. He rang Mel yesterday.
Sway him?
Well, Mel obviously had him on the radar. He would have been picked in the Prime Minister's 13 game, but he had a shoulder problem. So he was definitely on Mel's radar.
This wouldn't have happened if Bozo was coach. Bozo was still coach.
It's a different time. With due respect, it was a different time.
It was, but you know what he'd be doing? He'd be on the phone making sure that they're committed. And if they had any sorts of concerns, he'd make sure he allayed those concerns. That's what winning's about.
I'm sure Mel tried to do that. I mean,
that's the point I want to make. I think Mal has fallen over here in not being more proactive in ringing players, ringing different clubs to check on the availability and have a chat to these guys about wearing a green and gold jersey. Now, the reason he has backed off and hasn't done that because Michael Maguire's been doing it for New Zealand. And one club, Western Sydney club, got particularly upset about it, that they're fighting to make the grand final. And Madge's there saying, look, to play New Zealand, I need to see a bit more of this and that. And
if Mel had done that, to your point about Suaalii, if he'd done that with Victor Radley, he might be playing for Australia too.
Should Mel have to sell the Australian jersey to players? Surely the Australian jersey sells itself.
I agree, though.
Does it not?
There's a flip side to this. I understand the point that you're making, Kenty, and if Mal maybe had rang him and had a good conversation about what it means to play for Australia, which he may have, we don't know that. But on the flip side, if you're a player that doesn't want to wear the green and gold, if you haven't grown up watching Australia and saying that's what I want to do, that's my dream. If you want to knock that jersey back, you don't want him in the jersey.
Okay. So, but it's all right to have the dream to play for New South Wales.
What do you mean?
Well, play for New South Wales, then go play for Samoa.
Kenny,
it is because you can do both. There's the rules. You can do both.
We can't control a kid's dream. I can't control.
I'll tell you what. Let me put the cynic's hat on for just 1 second here. Do you mind? What about the fact that he had a busted game the other day when he moved to fullback, didn't play all that well. He gets the promise of playing fullback for Samoa at the World Cup, where he would only at best be a winger for Australia because Tedesco is the fullback. So he puts himself in the shop front window and he's now begun the agitation to get himself out of the Roosters deal. I'm a fullback, I want to be considered as a fullback and I'm going to negotiate as a fullback.
I agree with you. The opportunity to play fullback was obviously more appealing. And you can see Samoa got a really good side. It is going to help him in the shop window if he does have a barnstorm of the World Cup.
And you watch the conversation start after the World Cup and all through next season. I don't think it'll affect his...
Would he choose Samoan rugby union team instead of the ARU?
I think that's really unfair on Joseph Suaalii to suggest that he's doing this to play fullback. I mean, it's ridiculous. I think it's a ridiculous assertion for a 19-year-old kid to say he's chosen Samoa over Australia because he can play fullback. I think that's madness. I think that's a really cynical view, and I think it's really unfair on Joe.
Have you interviewed him?
I have spoken to him, I spoke to him today.
Did you ask him? You spoke to him today,
I didn't ask him about whether he'd done it to play fullback. I asked him why he'd done it.
He said it was about
family.
It was about family.
He said it was purely about family. It's about family and honouring his parents who sacrificed so much for him over his 19 years.
Righto.
I think it's a bit of both. I think he's proud, passionate Samoan ties. I also think combined with that, the percentage of his decision was around the opportunity to play fullback.
I think that's
Only percentage.
You don't think it's anything to do with
I don't think it's got
anything to do with his manager
nothing.
or a business decision?
Nothing to do with it. No.
It's not a business
at
decision.
all.
I'm asking the question.
I'm sure his manager, Isaac Moses, I'm sure he sat at the side. I'm sure he spoke to Joe about it. But the decision would have been Joe's decision ultimately, his family's decision.
Of course it would have been his decision, but he's a young, impressionable kid. He's taking advice from people much older and much more experienced
I'm sure
than
the people
him.
who took advice.
And if he maybe got a phone call from the Australian
sat
coach,
down with.
maybe would have listened to him as well.
But Kenny, the bottom line is I'm glad he's playing for him.
They got a good team. They got a good team.
I do.
They got a great team.
They'll be a must-watch football team.
Of course they will.
Out the back.
They're a tremendous chance. The Kiwis are clear favourites to win the World Cup, as they should be when you go through the roster.
Let's have a look at the team here. This is a Samoan World Cup team. I tell you what, it's a bloody good team. Let's have a look at it. Suaalii is the fullback there, as we can see. To'o, Crichton, Tago, May, Luai, Milford, Papali'i, Farmanu Brown, Barlaw, Sua, Leilua, Aloiai, Tabuai Fado, Molo, Tapau, and Faitaila Mariner. That is a red-hot
They
side.
should be third favourites. On the TAB, they should be behind Australia and New Zealand as third
They
favourites.
play England in the first game of the tournament.
They'll beat England.
And England have got some injury concerns and suspension concerns, so it would not surprise at all if they
Just
knocked
quickly
England
on
off.
Suaalii. So he's made the call now to play for Samoa.
As a fullback.
Can he not play for Australia ever again now?
Yes,
he
he
can.
Because they're a tier 2 nation.
And he can play Origin.
Under the rules,
I know the Origin one. I wasn't sure about
under the rules, Braith,
that shouldn't be the case.
in World Cup years, to help strengthen the World Cup, in World Cup years you are allowed to play for your nation, for a tier 2 nation of heritage, which is in his case Samoa. But I will say,
most players do that if they're not going to make the Australian team.
Yes.
They'll do that, but that's the permanent move.
Yeah.
That's a permanent. But in World Cup years, you're allowed to play for your heritage nation and then come back and commit yourself to Australia and New Zealand or England, whichever tier 1 nation you're from. That said, I've spoken to some people at the World Cup, International Rugby League, and this needs to happen. Samoa and Tonga are so strong, they seriously need to now be considered tier 1 nations. They are no longer tier 2 nations.
But they're only strong because they're tier 2 nations, because guys like Joe and Josh Papali'i and Junior Barlow play for them.
There's 6
because
players in
they know
that Samoa side who played Origin this year.
But if you make them a tier 1 nation, they can't. So then you
Maybe
suddenly
they'll
weaken
commit
them.
to Samoa then. If it means everything
turn
you
them back
tell us that
on-
it means to these people,
Maybe.
but if it means that to their family and all that, you're
But then you
trying to
weaken
tell us.
Origin, Kenty.
Kenty,
Then
do
you've
you-
got another issue.
No, you actually strengthen Origin. Long
Well, how?
term.
By taking those guys
Because
out
you
of
know what?
Origin.
No, because you reinvested what Origin is about playing for New South Wales and Queensland, not playing because you want to play Origin. And that's what gets lost in all this.
But they've got allegiance to both New South Wales. Joe Suaalii's got allegiance to New South Wales and Samoa.
Oh, come on,
It's
Reedy.
messy. Look, but you know the thing we're overlooking? How is Australia going to be on the wing now? Yeah. We've lost Brian To'o, we've lost Daniel Tupu out of Origin, we've now lost Suaalii.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Meninga has responded to the growing list of defections, and while confident Australia will field a strong side in the World Cup, the Kangaroos coach says it's time for the eligibility laws to be overhauled.
I'm not disappointed, but the fact is it needs to be. We need to have a look at how we clean it all up and the eligibility rules. But man, I'm happy for them if they make a decision that they actually want to play for their ancestral nation. So that's good for me, because I don't want them going away in the green and gold and second doubting themselves where they actually want to be. They want to be with another footy team. So for me, I'm really comfortable in the fact that the people who we pick want to be there. The people who we pick want to put the green and gold jersey on and will give great account of themselves, playing for their nation. And that's the type of person we want. And that's one of the first criteria picking a national team, is that they actually want to be there and want to play for their country. I'm really happy, but it does get messy when players ring up and you look at. They've indicated they want to play for Australia, and then all of a sudden, last moment, they want to play for their ancestral nation. They're not quite sure. For me, I'm glad they did ring me up, because, obviously they've been thinking and ahhing about it, and I don't want anybody and ahhing playing for Australia.
However, which way you look at this isn't ideal for the Australian Kangaroos. Look at the quality of players here that have hopped away. There's some good players there.
Look, I applaud what Mal said. I think he's spot on. I think you want patriots, you don't want mercenaries. You don't want people with a foot in
Mercenaries isn't the right word.
What, they'll cop the money to play Origin, but they won't play for Australia.
They're playing for their countries for free. Down the back of a plane in cattle class, sharing rooms.
Good luck.
Don't they
to
get
them.
paid?
They get paid too, Bob. They get paid meal allowances and bugger all else.
They don't get paid what the
Kenty.
Australians get paid. I agree with that, Buzz.
That's a
but
bit
the
harsh.
fact is, you cannot. Well,
They
there's
don't
been
have
a
the
push
money
to
break to pay them.
There's been a push for the Australian Rugby League the Commission to pay for them. So there has been. They're trying.
But if they want to grow the game, and this is a good thing, so to speak, why wouldn't the Australian Rugby League throw some money, or the Commission throw money in?
The competition is already at or about 50% Polynesian players. Okay, so the days when these archaic rules were drawn up about Tier 1 and Tier 2 nations and all this was drawn up, was back when there was less than 5% of the country was actually from Polynesia in the NRL. Back then it was the Australian Rugby League competition. The circumstances have changed, and I applaud what these guys are doing and go and playing for Samoa and Tonga, but you can't have it both ways. You can't sit there and declare yourself to play for New South Wales and Queensland and not play for Australia.
But that kills Origin, Kenty.
It doesn't kill Origin,
In my view, it
Buzz.
does.
Well, it either kills Origin or it kills the island nations. You're going to kill one of them.
Please, why does it
Buzz
kill
is
them?
right.
Why does it kill them?
Because you make them make a choice.
So
And
what
if they
happens
make a
to the
choice-
day? Let's look at the flip side. What happens to the day then when the New South Wales team runs out and there's 7 Samoans and 6 Tongans? Hang on a second. 7 Samoans. Hang on. 7 Samoans, 6 Tongans in the side. The Queensland team runs out. They've got 6 Samoans and 7 Tongans in their side. No Australian eligible players are making Origin.
That's not going to happen, Kenny. Come on, man. Be
Half the
realistic.
competition is
Kenny,
Polynesian
Well, I
players.
understand that's
Yeah, but
half, but a
Origin's
lot of them...
Origin, and Origin's supposed to be the best 34 players
From New South Wales or Queensland.
in the country.
Now, let me finish your sentence. From New South Wales or Queensland.
Yeah, but a lot of these boys, and you go through that Samoan side, born Mount Druitt, born...
Declare yourself for Australia then.